Did you think autotune and playback were the peak of musical cheating? Listen to this story. A hotel hallway, the door to one of the rooms is slightly open. Two police officers walk in, a man is lying on the floor, he's not moving. It's Rob Pilatus, one of the faces of the famous band Milli Vanilli.
Girl, you know it's true. I love you.
April 3rd, 1998, Pilatus is 32 years old. Just a few hours earlier, he overdosed on alcohol and pills. Now he lies alone on a dirty hotel carpet outside Frankfurt. Was it suicide? Officially, no, an accident. But in reality, Rob died for a completely different reason. He died from shame and despair because of a secret that at some point took over his life. 8 years earlier, he stood smiling on the Grammy stage in Los Angeles. Beside him was the other band member, Fab Morvan. The crowd cheered as they accepted the award for Best New Artist, and their songs were hummed by the whole world. But Rob and Fab were living a lie. They knew that award wasn't really theirs, because on that album they didn't sing a single word. Milli Vanilli was like a musical matrix, their faces, other people's voices, a success built on perfect deception, and eventually it crashed to the ground. I'm starting with a story from 27 years ago on purpose, because it helps us understand how the same mechanism shapes the world today. But before we get to today, let me tell you how the Milli Vanilli tragedy began. The 1980s, West Germany. Producer Frank Farian is trying to figure out how to make another hit. He's already well known. He was the man behind the group Boney M. He also employed a rather clever trick there by bringing in a charismatic black dancer to be the frontman. But it was Farian himself who actually performed most of the male vocals in the studio. The audience of the 70s didn't mind this because very few people knew about it. Now, we're in the year 1988. Frank Farian meets two young men, Rob Pilatus and Fabrice Morvan. Rob, a breakdancer and a model. Fab, a dancer and vocalist with big dreams. Farian sees their potential, an ideal MTV look. And if their singing isn't great, well, that's okay, because something can be worked out. Rob and Fab in turn are thrilled that they'll be made into a band. They get advances, new clothes, hairstyles, and that whole star image. And then Farian tells them, boys, you won't be the ones singing on these recordings. Rob and Fab signed a contract they never really read, and it said something very clearly. They would give their faces and image to the project, but other people would sing the vocals. Pilatus later said they protested right away. No, we want to sing ourselves. But Farian answered calmly, you already took the money, I've already invested in you, you don't have the money to pay me back. So if you walk away from this deal, you'll be in debt, and there will be no career. And that's how this cynical deal won. Rob later admitted they felt like they had sold their souls to the devil. They took part in the deception, hoping it was just for a moment, that they'd later get their own chance to sing. But that later never came. Anonymous vocalists worked in the studio on the debut album Girl, You Know It's True. 3 experienced singers, Charles Shaw, John Davis, and Brett Howell. Those are the voices you hear on every Milli Vanilli song. Rob and Fab weren't even allowed near the microphone. As they later said, Farian wouldn't let them sing a single line. Instead, they practiced choreography, posed for album covers, and gave interviews. The plan worked. In 1989, the album became a global hit. In the United States alone, it sold more than 6 million copies. The video played non-stop on MTV, and it started to feel like no one would ever uncover the lie. But then came July 21st, that same year. On stage, Rob and Fab are performing their hit. The backing track is playing, of course, just like always, but suddenly the sound glitches. At first, the audience thinks it's some kind of remix, But Rob Pilatus panics. He throws the microphone down and runs backstage. The crew cuts the tape. The crowd is confused. Total silence for a moment. But a little later, Rob and Fab come back on stage, like nothing happened. The concert goes on, and according to reports, most of the audience didn't even notice. People just thought it was a normal technical problem. But Rob Pilatus was shaken. He later said, "The exact moment that tape got stuck, I knew it was the beginning of the end for Milli Vanilli. For him, it was a nightmare. The moment the whole illusion cracked. After the show, he begged Farian to end it, but Farian refused, and they kept going." Charles Shaw, one of the real singers, soon went to the press and told the truth. He said he was the voice behind Milli Vanilli, but then he suddenly took it all back and went silent. Reportedly, Farian paid him $150,000 to sign a document saying it was just a joke. Farian never openly confirmed it, but the story keeps coming back, $150,000. And in 1989, that was a huge amount of money. It kept the truth buried long enough for Milli Vanilli to reach the Grammy ceremony. In 1990, Rob and Fab step on stage and take the award. They're at the peak of their fame, smiling, thanking everyone. We can only imagine what the real singers felt watching this on TV. In an interview with Time magazine, Rob said he was the new Elvis, and he bragged about how many records they had sold. What he said sounded incredibly arrogant. He later explained his English wasn't very good, that the reporter misunderstood him, and the media pulled that line out of context to create a sensation. But either way, the industry started seeing them as arrogant, and people love catching arrogant stars in a lie. Farian starts to worry he's losing control. Rob and Fab keep pushing to sing with their own voices, and their contract is about to end. So Farian moves first. He calls a press conference and announces that they were never the real singers in the band. "I hired them to be the faces and the dancers. The actual voices belong to other performers." Just imagine the shock and the media uproar that caused. For the first time in its history, the Grammy committee takes the award back from Milli Vanilli. Overnight, Rob and Fab become frauds, a global joke. Girl, You Know It's True had been one of the best-selling albums. Then it was pulled from the market. You couldn't legally buy it anymore. Lawsuits from fans started piling up. In total, 26 class action lawsuits in the United States against the label and the band. Rob and Fab had nowhere to run, so they organized their own press conference. Two agitated young men take their seats in front of the microphones. They remorsefully admit they cheated, but at the same time they say, "We have voices, we can sing. Farian just never led us." To prove it, they try to sing a part of a song a cappella.
This mics are fucked, you know, you guys. Girl, you know it's true. Ooh, 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 I love you.
Reporters later said their singing left a lot to be desired. But Rob and Fab never proved they were talented singers hidden in the shadows, like they claimed. The media turned brutal. Comedians kept mocking them, artists released diss tracks, and stars who had lost Grammys to them openly showed their satisfaction. It was one long wave of ridicule. Now let's go back to Rob Pilatus. What happened to him after the fall? In '91, Rob and Fab tried to make a comeback as a duo. They even appeared in a chewing gum commercial. In it, they joked about the scandal. They start singing and the playback breaks again. The idea was to ease the tension, to show they could laugh at themselves. But in reality, things were very different. In November, police in Los Angeles receive a call. On the 9th floor of a hotel, a man stands on the balcony. He's threatening to jump. It's Rob Pilatus. He's drunk, he's shouting that he doesn't want to live, and at the last second, police officers pull him back over the railing. After that incident, he was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for observation. In 1992, Rob and Fab signed with a small independent label and recorded an album, this time with their own voices. They tried everything to get back into the market, but no one really cared. The album sold only 2,000 copies, a complete failure. The label went bankrupt before it could even properly release it. The market didn't want Rob and Fab singing for real. People preferred their old fake album. After that failure, the two former friends went their separate ways. Fab Morvan chose to live away from the mainstream. He took care of himself. He quit drugs, and from time to time, he appeared in the media to defend his name. Rob chose a very different path. He fell into addiction and started committing crimes. Records show that in 1995 and 1996 he was involved in several fights and robberies. In one case, he beat a man with a metal lamp. In another, he tried to steal a car and a watch. He was arrested and the court sentenced him to 3 months in prison and 6 months in rehab. Rob served his time and was released on parole, and that's when Frank Farian stepped in again. Yes, the same producer who had exposed him before. Why? It's hard to say. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe he just smelled business again. He knew the scandal had already faded. In '97, he invited Rob and Fab to Europe and proposed bringing Milli Vanilli back. This time, they were supposed to sing with their own voices. Farian already had songs ready, and Rob actually looked better. He was starting to recover. April 2nd, 1998, Rob Pilatus arrives at Farian's studio in Germany. It's evening. Rob is staggering, slurring his words. He's completely drunk again. Farian and the team sent him back to the hotel to sober up. The next morning, Rob Pilatus is dead. The official cause is an accidental overdose, a mix of alcohol and medication, most likely psychotropic drugs. His body couldn't handle the toxic combination. It's a tragic and deeply sad ending. The story of Milli Vanilli is truly a monument to the hypocrisy of the music industry of those years. Everyone bought into that lie, and later the scapegoats were simply lynched. Coming back to today's vocal aids, we all know perfectly well that stars often perform with playback or use such heavy autotune that it no longer has anything to do with actual singing, but most of us accept it. We can explain it by saying that today, it's mostly not about singing, but about the show. Britney Spears, for example, always performed with playback, and nobody complained. Even in talent shows, there were mini scandals where producers enhanced voices with autotune, so that, as it was put, the audience impression would be better. Today, it's simply become the norm. Authenticity has faded into the background, and I came across a term that perfectly describes the situation today. We live in the era of performative post-truth, Instagram filters, stage scandals, manufactured fights. We all know that what we're watching to some degree is artificial, but most of us still want that illusion anyway, because it's simply more exciting than the raw, unfiltered truth. At the beginning, you saw the moment when Tate McRae was singing into a backwards microphone, and it happened in October last year. The clip spread across the internet, a wave of comments followed, but in the end, her fans defended her. They wrote that you could hear she was still singing live, that she was singing a little. And somehow that alone was already enough for people. You can clearly see a massive generational shift here. Some will say it's a decline in standards, others will call it progress. I'm not really objective here because I used to sing myself, and for me, what matters in a voice is authenticity and real emotion, even if the singer doesn't hit every note perfectly. That part doesn't matter to me, as long as they can pull me into the story they're telling with the song. Younger listeners react with more understanding. They say it helps the singer protect their voice. And that part is also true because you simply can't perform several shows a week at 100%. Add to that the fact that someone might be sick or just exhausted, and the organizer usually doesn't care. So you might ask, if people no longer worry about playback or autotune, why am I even bringing this up? Because besides that, there's also something called ghost singing, the same thing we saw with Milli Vanilli. But today, the situation becomes even more interesting. The music industry has always relied on people behind the scenes, because creating a star takes an entire team, but the voice itself always felt sacred. Perhaps embellished, but we still believed it belonged to the person we would later see on stage. It turns out that Milli Vanilli were not an exception at all, and recording studios gladly took advantage of the fact that someone else was actually singing, someone we, the audience, never knew. It's interesting how audiences have accepted tricks like this in different forms. We all know Rihanna doesn't write all her songs herself, or that Jennifer Lopez, let's say, sometimes relies on younger voices. Books? Do you really think your idol actually wrote it? Even if the book was created on their behalf, they may have had nothing to do with the writing. They simply appeared on the cover. Some ghost singer scandals only came out because the real vocalists revealed themselves years later. But think about it for a moment. What if the ghost singer didn't exist at all? Would we ever find out the truth? April 2023, a song appears on TikTok. A verse sung by Drake, the chorus by The Weeknd. The lyrics sound exactly like their style, so people think it's great. Just some unreleased track that leaked online. Within a few days, the song gets more than 15 million views. But the supposed singers knew nothing about it. It turned out these weren't their recordings at all, but artificial intelligence. The voices had been generated and placed over the music, and that was the moment when platforms like Spotify, TikTok, and YouTube had to decide which side they were on: human artists or AI deepfakes. Interestingly, the individual operating under the pseudonym Ghostwriter977, who was responsible for publishing this track, claimed to have written the original lyrics and music. They treated the voices as instruments. They even submitted the track for a Grammy nomination in the rap category, but it was ultimately deemed ineligible. It's clearly a new trend, because if Milli Vanilli had used artificial ghost singers, there's a good chance we might never have found out. Voice cloning is also no longer just a problem for artists. More and more scams are now using exactly this method. You answer the phone and hear your child's voice, saying they urgently need help right now. Imagine hearing the voice of your own daughter on the phone. She's crying, it sounds completely real. Then suddenly, someone takes the phone from her and demands money. Sadly, people do fall for this, because in that moment of panic, it's very easy to make a mistake. A simple password agreed on with your family and a moment to pause can often prevent the worst, but the situation is serious. Voice scams have become a real new plague these days. They say that just 3 seconds are enough to more or less copy your voice, and social media platforms are full of our recordings. But when we return to the music industry, patents like the one with Drake and The Weeknd are not legal. Simply put, if I upload an AI-generated song where the Polish singer Sana performs a track by another Polish artist, Daria Zawialow, I'm violating both Sana's image rights and the copyright to Daria's song. And now, let's go back to 1990. The moment when Rob and Fab finally admit the truth on camera. One question comes up right away. Why did you do it? Because we wanted to be at the top so badly. We truly believe that's what show business was all about. And that's why we chose the easy path. And we all saw how that story eventually ended for them. Fame on the screen is very often just an illusion. Real life can look very different from the one they try to show us. And I'm not claiming at this moment that shortcuts never work for anyone. But let's not treat it as a rule, because it's more often an exception. Behind all those failed attempts to chase quick fame and huge money, there are actually thousands of people, and thousands of personal tragedies we will probably never hear about. Take care and see you. 3.5 million pages of documents, thousands of recordings. Epstein's files have finally been revealed. The internet is filling with names of billionaires, politicians and celebrities. There's just one problem: none of them have been charged. Click the thumbnail to see why the Epstein list is a fiction. This is called Lemon. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in a moment.